Let's see. In a little bit, we're going to be doing like a Jeopardy game to help you guys review. And in doing that, we're going to have two teams. And in doing that, we need team names. So you guys be thinking of what team names you would like. I mean, past classes have done everything from like Army versus Navy to House of Representatives versus the Senate versus, I mean, even weird things like Gandor versus Mordor. Or, some have been government historical, like Anti-Federalist versus Federalist, John Adams versus Jefferson, Democrats versus Republicans. A couple times it was Mr. Pratt versus the class. Mr. Pratt team has yet to lose. That's kind of funny. There's been Star Wars themes like Sith versus Jedi, or Jack Bauer versus CTU. That's kind of an interesting. But I don't know. Some of you may not remember 24. So those were from years ago. It's also been Chuck Norris versus Jack Bauer. So anyway, a lot of different ideas, directions you could go. So be thinking about that. I'll ask you about that. But before we get to the review, let's go over a couple things briefly. Oh, and we also have the Meet Your, yes, the TV show 24. Yeah, that was a long time ago. Although they came out with a 12-hour version about a year or two ago. But anyway, before we get to that and before we get to the the pictures, let's go over a couple things briefly. Hopefully you watched the video on Lincoln and interposition. What'd you all think? Did you learn some stuff? Did you find it interesting? Learn anything new about old Abraham Lincoln? You should note that the DVD mentioned a tremendous and really exciting change that came over Lincoln during the latter part of his second term. And it came after a period of deep depression in his life. And if you're wondering what that is, well, I'm going to be discussing that in the Government 2 class, which meets during the second semester on Friday mornings. It's a pretty dramatic story as the change that came over him completely transformed his life. So those of you who are taking Government 2, you're going to have to wait until then to get the rest of the story. Oh, the suspense! But for now, we can briefly discuss some of the material that the DVD covered on Lincoln. So I guess he was not as good as... Yeah, well, we're going to actually talk about that because the DVD referred to the Lincoln myth, which is what I think Daniel's getting to. What is that? What is the Lincoln myth? And Sierra says, procedure when I was... I'll just try to... Okay, thanks, Sierra, for that. What was the Lincoln myth? Yeah, let's ask Sierra to do some more chatting. See if she says anything. He loved the slaves. What do you mean he loved the slaves? Myth was that, okay, yeah, the myth was that he was anti-slavery, or that he was always anti-slavery. And, well, actually, no, let me correct that. That's not actually the myth. He was always anti-slavery. That was true. And, that was made clear in the debates, et cetera, et cetera. But what's a myth was that that didn't mean that he necessarily had tremendous affection for them. Let's put it that way, right? That's maybe putting it mildly. I mean, but at least he was on the right side of the issue. I mean, he did consider the slaves to be humans, and that they shouldn't be enslaved. But yeah, almost every poll of American opinion shows that Lincoln is one of the top 3 favorite U.S. presidents of all time. And as you see the kids' books there, and some of you probably have, I think we have every single one of those in our home, and those books laud him as one of our greatest presidents. But when you look at what the historians say, even ones who love Lincoln they use words like dictator to describe him. But, that information about him being a despot doesn't trickle down into most history books, not to mention the kids' books. So that's the Lincoln myth, as one historian put it. That he's treated very kindly with kid gloves, even while at the same time they acknowledge, he was a little, over the top, overbearing. But let's talk about secession. Was Lincoln always against secession? Was he always against the right of states to secede from the Union? You didn't get that far in the DVD. Okay, there we go. We get some answers. No, he wasn't. He was quite emphatic in speeches prior to becoming president that he supported the principle of secession. It's not unusual to see a politician, even today, who changes his views on an issue to help him get elected or to help him get support from a particular political party. It's possible that his views just genuinely change. It's also possible that, like a lot of politicians, he was saying what was politically expedient at the time. So the war between the states was a failed attempt, you might say, at interposition. Obviously, it was failed since the South lost. However, the South was not completely righteous in its cause, certainly because of the slavery issue, and because they were trying to dissolve the Union when there was no political adultery. Don and Hill used to be buds, as far as I understand. Don and Hill? Talking about the election. Talking about which... okay, sorry. Anyway, but, having said that the South wasn't completely righteous in its cause, unless we think that it was only the South that was in the wrong, we need to realize that the North wasn't pure as the driven snow either. What were the faults? What were some of the faults in the North? And this was, you might remember, briefly mentioned at the end of the video. What were some of the faults of the North? Did anybody catch those? I guess it was one of those things, Julia, that you had to be there. Oh, wait, we were there. Okay, tariffs on the South. That's one of the things, right? Basically, the North favored a lot of big government, unconstitutional things, whereas in the South, if you ignore the slavery issue, they favored a lot of small government. Well, even I guess that you might say is consistent because they were saying the government should stay out of our lives. However, it does come across as pretty hypocritical when it's leave us alone so we can enslave another human being. But the North had the North favored big government policies that weren't supported by the Constitution. Many of the radical Republicans in Lincoln's party even favored the war as an excuse to get their policies enacted. And these were policies that had been blocked for years by the congressmen in the South who favored small government. Things like internal improvements, funding railroads, funding canals, or the building of them, tariffs, additional taxes, things like all these things were being blocked by the South, and the North wanted to do them. Also, you might have been surprised to hear about the views of Southern secession in the South. For example, what notable official in the South supported secession in principle, but opposed secession by the Southern states in the 1860s? And you see a drawing of him there. Do you remember what his name was? He was actually, Stephen, or close. His last name was Stevens. You're on the right track. And he actually ended up becoming the vice president of the Confederacy. Alexander Stevens. Anyway, I thought he made a very compelling case. He said he opposed secession, and you can see it there on the slide. He opposed secession in the 1860s because he said the South was violating the constitutional compact when there had been no breach of the Constitution by the North. In other words, the North hadn't done anything improper, unconstitutional to justify secession. Basically, they were seceding because of the swearing in of Abraham Lincoln, a man who'd been lawfully elected according to the requirements of the Constitution. Now, the Southerners didn't like what Lincoln said he was going to do, but he hadn't done those things. He had simply said things that he favored. So, nothing unconstitutional had happened. And Alexander Stephens said, there's really no cause for secession. Yeah, they were having a hissy fit. Exactly right. Anyway, so that's just a brief overview of the DVD. Any other questions or comments on the DVD? I mean, you might be wondering, well, will the material that is presented in the DVDs be on the test? And the answer is yes. Most of the video segments you saw in DVD sessions 1 and 4, we already discussed thoroughly in class. And while we haven't really discussed the one that you just saw, the Lincoln DVD, session 6, the material there is fair game as well. So if you didn't watch the video over the past couple weeks, please make sure you do so this week. But again, the video you saw on Lincoln only gave you part of the Lincoln story. So if you're taking the Government 2 class this spring, you'll get, as a famous radio personality used to say, his name was Paul Harvey, he used to say, and now for the rest of the story. And you'll get the rest of the story, learn about the amazing change that took over Lincoln's life. And I promise you the course will take a very unique look at the U.S. presidents. By unique, I mean that you're going to learn a lot of the things that many history classes don't look at. For example, I always find this interesting that, even though we'll look at policies of each president, we'll also look at fun things like, who was the president who gave an interview to a female reporter while he was skinny dipping in the Potomac River? Scandalous! Oh my goodness. Yeah, she actually sat on his clothes until he'd do the interview. Yeah, it's not just today that such scandalous events occur. Anyway, so you'll learn what it was that changed Lincoln's life so dramatically after he went through a severe depression. You'll learn little interesting tidbits. I don't know if there was really a bear hiding in the woods, but who was that president that gave that very awkward interview? But anyway, we'll talk about things like that. And of course, we will, well, I guess that's it. We're going to want to move on and talk about the test. Let me just give you an overview real quick of what the test will be like. Obviously, it's due next week prior to the start of class. It's an online test. It's automatically graded just like your quizzes. Your parents must proctor this test, okay, because this is a closed book one. Unlike some of the, unlike your open book quizzes, this one is closed book. So closed book, closed, you can't search on the internet for answers, can't use notes. So it must be proctored, okay? Online test, automatic. Please make sure that you don't accidentally close your test, because that gives you a 0 or a very bad grade, right? Some of you have had some issues with that, so be very careful about that. Now, how to prepare for the midterm? Well, be familiar with the readings in the book, chapters 1 through 5. Even though you've read chapter 6, chapter 6 is not on the test. Okay, you have already read chapter 6, right? Didn't I assigned that last week? Yeah. So it's chapters 1 through 5, not 6, plus the introduction in the book. Don't forget the end of the chapter questions, which helps you with the study, and although you've done a lot of those. Be familiar with the constitutional provisions that were highlighted in chapters 1 through 5. If you have, as you're reading your chapters 1 through 5 and you see constitutional provisions, they're always bolded. That means those provisions are more important than others. Get what I mean? Hence the reason they're bolded. Is it timed? It is, but there's no way it should take you too long, because I think you have 90 minutes. So it basically just keeps you from, like, forgetting to close it or something. It'll close it automatically. But I mean, you're in real trouble if you need more than 90 minutes, because it's like yeah, maybe 40 questions, give or take. Don't neglect to look over the articles entitled "How Laws Are Made and a More Perfect Union: The Creation of the U.S. Constitution." Take note of important dates, such as, like, for example, I realize with that article, "A More Perfect Union," there's a lot of stuff in there. So this is why I say take note of important dates, such as the signing and the ratification of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Be familiar with important themes in that article, like, let's say, the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, stuff like that. I mean, beyond that, there's a lot of stuff in there that's, you know, it's just kind of overkill. I wanted you to read it, but I'm not. I'm looking for the big things, the big important dates and the big themes, which I've just mentioned. How to prepare for the midterm continued. Be familiar with the powers in Article 1, Section 8. For example, if you're asked a question that says, does Congress have authority to fund the salaries of professional football players? Well, you've read Article 1, Section 8. So you should know that the answer is no. Obviously, the test question won't be that easy. If you find typos in the exam, can we assume that if we show you, we'll receive 100% on that certain question? I don't know about a typo, but if there is a mistake, yeah, you can ask me about that, and you would get credit for it if, you know, like, hey, it said this was the right answer, but really this was the right answer. So, yeah. You know, let's say with this question, does Congress have the authority to fund the salaries of professional football players? And the correct answer was marked as, yes, Congress does have the authority. Well, obviously that's a mistake. But if that happened, then you could point out, hey, I got the answer wrong, and I'd like credit for it. I'm getting there. Yes, we will need to know the Bible verse. Absolutely. Second bullet, though, review the notes from class. Okay, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, you've already been quizzed on your book reading, so a lot of the test is going to deal with your class notes. So here's things that you can take notice of in your notes. Biblical passages and principles. Now, sometimes, you know, like, let's say Great Britain, you know, pulling that fat kid out of the home. Okay, like current news articles that were in the PowerPoints. Those are there for illustrative purposes to help you see, you know, things that we're talking about. Don't concern yourself with that. What I want you to be really concerned with are the historical items. You know, the things that, when I say historical, I mean even, you know, the fat kid from Great Britain getting pulled out of his home, technically that's history. But I'm talking about stuff from the founding era, or, you know, for the founding era plus 100 years. You know, those are the kind of things that I'm looking for, or biblical passages. So anything dealing in your notes with the biblical passages or historical items, you know, Alien and Sedition Act, you know, this kind of thing, all that type of stuff is absolutely fair game. And then the third bullet item, yes, make sure you've memorized Romans 13, 1, 2, and 4 in the ESV. I think I've told you that all along, because you will be tested by filling in the blanks with multiple choice options. And of course, make sure you've viewed the 3 DVD sessions, numbers 1, 4, and 6. By the way, there is a study guide in the study place. I think I did this for the first time last year, and kids told me it was a hit. It really helped them. So, hey, it's there for you. It basically shows you things to study for. So you guys might even want to get a study group together, you know, like divvy up, you know, hey, give people different things to look up, and then you come together and you know, share them. So, you know, consider that. So that's something that you guys could do. Let's see, what else? The test is all multiple choice and true false, no essay questions. Your letter to your state legislator is being treated as the essay portion of the midterm. Okay? So that's pretty much what the test is like. Now I'm going to give you examples of, to help jog your memory and show you the types of things that you would want to be studying. But before we do that, let me ask you if you have any questions on that, on everything that we've just talked about, because now we're going to briefly, I'm going to let you meet your classmates. But first, let me just pause if there's any questions on what we just went over. No, sire. Yes, King Eric. All right. Okay, if no questions, then did you guys decide what you would like to, what team names you'd like? Why don't you guys decide that, and I'm going to divide the teams up into, I'm going to divide them up evenly right now. I'm just going to go through my chat box and do that. So why don't you guys just throw out names and kind of come to a decision amongst yourselves. Let's see. All right. Did we come to a decision? Politically, say boys against girls. Well, it's too late for that because I already divided the teams up and they weren't by gender. Essay midterm back. Oh my. Well, Sierra, I just finished grading Section 2's week 4 answers. So now that I've been able to take a breath, I'm going to get started on y'all's. So hopefully over the next couple weeks. Hopefully it doesn't take me into Thanksgiving. Although it might for the Section 2 class. CNN. We could do CNN. Sorry about that, guys. The internet went out. Bear with me. Okay, there we go. Awesome. All right. Here's what we're going to do so that we can get right into things and start moving. Let's go with the CNN versus Fox idea. So here's the CNN team. Jaylene, Daniel, Mark, Logan, Lizzie, Chloe. Oh, Jaylene, I'm sorry. I had said that you weren't in class when we were going through that. Did you just come in? Did you come in late? Or did I just totally ignore? Oh, you were there? Oh my, that's so funny. So sorry about that. I just had in my mind you weren't going to be in class. Okay, did I get it right? Are you from Connecticut? Oh, Massachusetts. Okay. All right. Missed it by that much, as Maxwell Smart used to say. And she was even commenting, and yeah, so it was like a ghost. I just didn't see it. All right. So yeah, now it hit me since I've written your name down. Jaylene is the team captain for CNN. Daniel, Mark, Logan, Lizzie, and Chloe. I just going by writing names down. For the Fox team, Fox News, that is, we have Sarah, Julia, Abby, Brooks, Hannah, and Sierra if she is able and isn't feeling under the influence. All right, but basically what we're going to do is I'm going to throw out some questions. This is going to give you kind of an idea of the types of things you should be studying. Obviously, it does it in a little bit of a fun way too. But you guys, you obviously have your study guide and things like that, which will tremendously help you. But at the same time, I think this will help too. Now, I'm not saying these are the questions on the test, but again, these are the types of questions that will be on the test. So it will help you in your studying just to be hearing today's our class and the types of questions we go through. So let's start with, let me just lay out some ground rules. We're going to play Jeopardy, okay? And what I'll do is I'll give you a question, and then you give me an answer. When you answer it, please private chat it so that makes sure that I see it in this midst of, everything that you guys are saying. I mean, hey, if I can miss what Jaylene is saying, I can miss your answer. So private chat it, that'll put it in red. Also, when you tell me a category and amount that you're selecting, private chat it, that puts it in red to make sure that I see it. We also play a little bit of, what's it called? Family Feud. You know how in Family Feud, if one team doesn't get the answer, the other team can steal? Well, we'll have a little bit of that, and so when that situation arises, I'll explain further. Okay? So for starters, well, let me just tell you what the categories are. People is obviously about people. Con, Constitutional Convention, questions about the Constitutional Convention. Bible questions. Recipes. What are your favorite chocolate chip cookie recipes, pumpkin spice recipes, things like that? No, that's not really what that's about. No, not really. That refers to the constitutional recipe for freedom. In other words, those are questions from the textbook. So that's recipes, questions from the textbook. Constitution, questions from the Constitution, and history, historical questions. All right, so for starters, Jaylene, Sarah, Daniel, and Julia, please give me a category and amount. Give me a category and amount. And remember to private chat it. And so Jaylene will be the team captain for CNN, Sarah, team captain for Fox. Okay, Julia gives me Bible for 300, so that can no longer be used again. Okay, how about Sarah, Daniel, and Julia? Jaylene says, Bible for 100 for Jaylene. How about Daniel and Sarah? Daniel and Sarah. Okay, Sarah, recipes for 200, which leaves Daniel. Silence. Well, if you don't give me anything, you forfeit the points. All right, Jaylene, here's the question for you. Bible for 100. What is the daily requirement that Deuteronomy 17 places on the king? Might remember that we talked about this for a couple weeks in a row. By the way, this is a closed notes quiz here. Closed book too. Closed Bible also. So can't go search for it. What is the daily requirement that Deuteronomy 17 places on the king? Daniel picked people for 100. Peeps for 100. Could you say the teams again? The teams are, the CNN team is Jaylene, Daniel, Mark, Logan, Lizzie, and Chloe. The Fox team is Sarah, Julia, Abby, Brooks, Hannah, and Sierra. So basically right now we've got 4 people getting questions. It's 2 against 2, basically. Jaylene and Daniel going up against Sarah and Julia. All right, Sarah, here's your question. Recipes for 200. Sarah, what is a republic and how does it limit the power of government officials? What is a republic and how does it limit the power of government officials? Daniel, people for 100. Daniel, who was Karl Marx? Who was Karl Marx? That's Daniel's question. Julia, Bible for 300. Julia, how did the Pharaoh exercise all 3 government powers in Exodus 5? How did Pharaoh exercise all 3 government powers in Exodus 5? By the way, if for any of these, if you want to speak it on mic, just let me know. Yeah, so you can either chat the answer, which is probably preferred, but you can also speak it. Speak it to me! So just let me know. There you go. Closed books, closed notes, open minds. Yes, you can answer the question now. Absolutely. So all you 4 that have those questions, just go ahead and answer. All right. And then Mark and Abby, don't give me your categories and amounts yet. Actually, go ahead and give me your category and amount. I'm not going to give you the question yet, so we don't have too many questions out there, but go ahead and give me your category and amount. Abby wants people for 200. Peeps for 200. 200. And Mark wants Constitution for 400. Pretty big one there, swinging for the fences. All right. Let's see. Okay. We have one incorrect answer so far. So for that, I'm going to throw it over. It came from the Fox team, so I'm going to throw it over to CNN. This is the steal attempt. Okay, this is the Family Feud aspect to this. And since Jaylene has given me the right answer, what was the daily requirement that Deuteronomy imposed on the king? It was to write a scroll of the law from Leviticus and read it every day. Jaylene got that, so that means the CNN team has picked up 100. And that's good to have that out of the way, because Jaylene is the team captain. Here's what you guys do. I'm going to give you the wrong answer from the Fox team. You guys will listen to it. You'll be able, rather than you you know, for most questions, it's just you answering individually. On a steal attempt, the entire team gets to discuss it. Okay? The entire team discusses it, and the team captain gives me the final answer. So it's a little bit of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Because I'll say, is that your final answer? And you say, yeah. So here's the question. The question was, what is a republic and how does it limit the power of government officials? What is a republic and how does it limit the power of government officials? So Jaylene, Daniel, Mark, Logan, Lizzie, and Chloe, all of you can discuss that. And Jaylene, when you're ready, private chat it to me. Can you phone a friend? Ha ha! No. No, sirree. All right, let's see what other answers we've got. No, you don't have to answer that way, Daniel. You don't have to do what is. You can just answer. And Daniel said, Karl Marx was a German socialist. That is correct. Can you give me a little bit more like what he's really known for? All right, you're on the right track. All right? You are on the right track. I mean, you're 99% of the way there. Just tell me by what title do we know him as? And then Julia, let's see, did Julia give me an answer? Okay, he exercised, okay, talking about the Pharaoh, Julia says he exercised legislative decree, judicial in hearing and ignoring the complaints of the people, and executive in exercise. Okay, so how did the Pharaoh exercise all three powers? He legislated by coming up with a rule. Hey, no more straw for your bricks. We're not going to give it to you. He was the executive power. He sent the taskmasters out to punish and force compliance. And he was judicial. When there was complaints about this unfair law and unfair enforcement, he was the one who heard the complaints. So he was legislator, executive, and judge. So that is 300 for the Fox team. So right now, in terms of answers that we have, we've got 300 for Fox, 100 for CNN. Okay. And Daniel, did you get me a little bit more there, or were you stumped? Daniel, where is Daniel? Daniel's there. You're stumped. All right. Well, you got, like I said, you got most of it. So I'm going to give you, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to give you 90 points out of 100. Because he was a German socialist. What I was looking for is that he was the father of communism, known as the father of communism. Okay? So that was the missing term. Let's see, Jaylene, do we have a final answer on what is a republic and how does it limit the power of government officials? Sounds like they're still working on that. Okay, then let me ask Mark and Abby to pay attention because I'm going to give you your questions. Let's see, Mark said Constitution 400 and then people. Okay, Constitution for 400. This is for Mark. Mark, what was the 9th state to ratify the Constitution and thus put the document into force? What was the 9th state to ratify the Constitution and thus put the document into force? Abby, people for 200. Abby, who was the king who took huge chunks of the Mosaic Civil Code and made them the law of England? All I need is the king's name who took huge chunks of the Mosaic Civil Code and made them the law of England. All right, so that's for Mark and Abby. We've already gotten 3 answers. We're still looking for that steal attempt. Jaylene, do you have a final answer? Looks like Jaylene's working on it. Okay, Logan and Brooks, give me category and amount. Correct, Mark, because it's not a steal attempt. Jaylene just sent it. Okay. Republic equals elected representative government of the people such that there are checks and balances. Okay. A republic is where you have representative government. Okay. That is what a republic is. Then the other part of the question is, how does it limit the power of government officials? Here, let me just show you what Jaylene said. Republic equals elected representative government of the people. So the elected part is the limitation of government officials, because if those government officials are acting wrongfully, unconstitutionally, they can be unelected. So there you have your limitation on the power of government officials. The whole aspect of checks and balances, that's in a sense a whole nother thing. Okay, I mean you can say having a Republican form of government is a form of having a check and balance. Okay, that's true. But checks and balances is a very broad category. Having a republic is just one example of that. But the whole aspect of a republic being a check and balance is that the people who elect the representatives can fire them as well. Does that make sense? So because that was a steal attempt, the CNN team will get half the points. It was originally a 200-point question, so they get half the points. So that's 100. So now we're real close. CNN has 290, Fox has 300. That's pretty close. All right, we have some answers here. Who was the king that took huge chunks of the Mosaic Civil Code? No, it was not William Blackstone. So here we have another steal attempt. This time I'll let Daniel, who was right under the team captain, assistant team captain, Daniel can give me the final answer. So CNN team made up of Jaylene, Daniel, Mark, Logan, Lizzie, and Chloe. Here's your second steal attempt. Who was the king who took huge chunks of the Mosaic Civil Code and made them the law of England? Please, Daniel, you can private chat the answer to me when you get it. Mark, in answer to the question, what was the 9th state to ratify the Constitution and thus put the document into force? Because 9 states had to ratify before the Constitution became the law. He said it was New Hampshire. That is correct. And so that means 400 points for CNN. They take the lead with that one. All right, Logan and Brooks, category and amount. Lizzie and Hannah, category and amount. Okay, do y'all really need the question again? Who was the king who took huge chunks of the Mosaic Civil Code and made it the law of England? Okay, that's your steal attempt, CNN. Elizabeth, Bible for 200. Okay. Brooks, history for 200. Okay, how about Hannah and Logan? Daniel has given me a final answer by private chatting it to me. He says that the king who took huge chunks of the Mosaic Civil Code and made them the law of England, answering for CNN, he says it's King Alfred the Great. And that is correct. So that's that's half the point, so that's another 100 for CNN. So after 6 people have answered, Fox is stuck at 300, whereas CNN has launched ahead to 790. All right, Fox, let's go. You guys have some catching up to do. Logan would like Bible for 400. And Hannah? Hannah. Where's Richard Murdoch when you think he'd be able to help you guys? All right, Logan, Bible for 400. Logan, what is the book of the Bible which indicates that God exercises all 3 government powers? You remember we looked at a verse in class where God exercises all 3 government powers. tell me what book of the Bible that came from. That's Logan's question. Brooks, history for 200. Brooks, when the founders referred to the laws of nature and nature's God in the Declaration of Independence, they were referring to two things, okay, with laws of nature and nature's God. What were the two things they were referring to? That's Brooks' question. Hannah would like Con-Con for 100. Thank you, Hannah. Finally got somebody to do Constitutional Convention. Hannah, here's yours. In what city was the Constitutional Convention held? That is your question. Con-Con for 100. And Lizzie, Bible for 200. Lizzie, fill in the blank for the following verse in Romans 13:4. Right there. I should say fill in the blanks. Okay? So if you would please fill in those blanks. This is, of course, the passage that you need to memorize, and you will be tested on this. Logan, your question was, what is the book of the Bible which indicates that God exercises all three government powers? All right, so Logan, Brooks, Lizzie, and Hannah have their questions. Did I ever get I did get the final answer. Okay, never mind. So we're waiting on them. Hannah, good thing you're not going to be tested on spelling. Oof. But you got it right. That's what counts. I know what you were trying to say. So Hannah comes through on Con-Con, Constitutional Convention. What city was the Constitutional Convention held? She said, oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I need to give you a second shot at this, Hannah, because the answer you gave me was a state. It just so happens that the answer is in that state, but I didn't ask for state. I asked for city. So give me the city. It's a city in that state, but give me the city, please. And Elizabeth has given me a fill in the blanks. She says in this order, the missing words are servant, bear, avenger, wrath. So for he is God's servant for your good, but if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. And that is correct. So let's see, that was Elizabeth's Bible for 200, so it's 200 more points for CNN. 200 more! All right, so now we can go back a slide. Hannah says, Philadelphia is where the Con-Con was held, and that's correct. So that's 100 for Fox. Hey, they finally moved up to 400. All right. Logan says, let's see, what was your... nice try, but that's not the book of the Bible indicating God exercises all three government powers. So, Fox has their first steal attempt. Sarah, you're the team captain. You're going to give me the final answer. Sarah, Julia, Abby, Brooks, Hannah, and Sierra, tell me, and Sarah gives me the final answer, private chatted, what is the book of the Bible? There was a specific verse indicating God exercises all three government powers. I'm not asking for the verse. I'm just asking for the book of the Bible. And you have a 1 out of 69 chance in getting it right. So I'm not answering that, Julia. If both teams get it wrong, then the question just evaporates. Nobody gets it. All right. All right. Let's see. Do we have an answer for Brooks? Yes, we do. When the founder said laws of nature, nature's God, they meant that they were breaking away from the king because of the negative effects of tyranny. As over the nature of man, they were also using the Bible and the example of the biblical justification for breaking away from the king. You like my beatboxing? Yeah, it's pretty lame, I know. Here's what I'm going to do, Brooks. I'm going to give you half the points. You didn't really nail it, fact, I'll give you a quarter of the points. So that's 50 points for Fox. Because you did mention that they were using the Bible for justification. And that's a key part of this. So laws of nature and nature's God are, quite simply, the laws of God as revealed in creation and revealed in the Bible. Now, Brooks was speaking to the fact, why were they appealing to the laws of nature and nature's God? It was to justify their break with England, and that's true. But the question was, what were the laws of nature and nature's God? And the laws of nature were God's laws. And since you didn't mention that they were God's laws, Brooks, that's why I couldn't give you even half the points. But you did mention something important, and that was that they were using biblical justification. So yeah, the laws of nature and nature's God specifically refer to the laws of the Bible, which are also the laws that are revealed in creation, which are those laws that God has written on our conscience. They're one and the same law, laws in the Bible, laws of conscience. So 50 points for Fox. So they're up to 450, whereas CNN is at 1190. No, take that back. 990. Okay. Sarah, do we have a final answer? Do we have a final answer on what was the book of the Bible? Very clever. They tried a two-prong approach. One guess from the Old Testament, one from the New. Both guesses were Deuteronomy and Romans. Both guesses are wrong. So I will give you the answer, and Mr. Pratt will get the points. The answer was Isaiah 33:22. For the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our king. Isaiah 33:22. So it came from the book of Isaiah. Okay. So we're almost, let's see, we have 15 minutes left. Sierra, do you feel up to taking a question? Because if not, we can just, although it makes it nice and even, because then that means everybody will have been asked a question. Well, if you want, you can pick recipes, constitution, or history for 100. Those are the easier questions. They obviously get harder as you go down the line. So you want to give me one from either of those three categories? Isn't Romans 13:1? No, because Logan, it doesn't. Hey, Romans 13:1 is an important verse, but it doesn't say that God exercises all three government powers like it specifically says in Isaiah 33:22. Could you have one person help you? Sierra, we can't do that. You'll like this question. Here's your question, Sierra. And you know what? If you don't get it, then it'll be a steal attempt, and they only get 50 points. 50 points is not much for a steal attempt. So here's your question, Sierra. What are the three things that are the supreme law of the land? What are the three things that are the supreme law of the land? That's not, you can't look it up, but it's in Article 6 of the Constitution. The three things that are the supreme law of the land. You've read it in the book. We've talked about it in the talked about it in class. Wait, but is this stuff in the textbook? Like, are we supposed to know this for the test? And no on the question for the 500 pointers. Well, as I was saying earlier, these are the types of questions that you would have on the test. So this is helping, so for example, if you're sitting here and you're thinking, hey, I know most of these answers, you're already in pretty good shape. If you're thinking, dang, I don't know any of these answers, it's telling you, you've got to, it's not saying you're going to do bad. Well, it will if you don't study. It just means you need to study. And so as you look through the study guide, it'll point you back to places where you can refresh your memory and things like that. So yeah. Chloe, did I get a category and amount from you? If you did, it has disappeared into the ether sphere. Sierra, your question was, what three things are the supreme law of the land? The Constitution says three things are the supreme law of the land. So if you could list those. And Chloe would like con for 200. All right. Con for 200. Here you go. I probably should have given Sierra this one because it's the only true-false question of the afternoon. So you have a 50% chance. So Chloe, you have a 50% chance. True-false. Listen carefully. The Founding Fathers were frustrated by reporters who kept twisting what was said during the debates of the convention. Boy, this is a timely question, right? Have you all seen the way the media has absolutely lied about Ben Carson's biography? I mean, it's just horrendous. So anyway, we can't go on that tangent. Founding Fathers were frustrated by reporters who kept twisting what was said during the debates of the Constitutional Convention. True or false? You just have to pick one. If you don't know, you just flip a coin, right? All right. So that's Chloe and Sierra going head to head. So that means we go back to the top, and we've got less than 10 minutes. We can still ask a few more questions. However, nobody has asked questions from the book. So at this point, the next two questions must come from the book. So Jaylene and Sarah, pick a the category is given to you, recipes. So pick an amount from recipes. Sarah wants 100, so recipes for 100. And Jaylene, it cannot be for the Rice Krispie treats. 200. Okay, recipes for 200. Man, you guys are really scared of questions from the book. All right, Sarah, recipes for 100. What event did the book point out that shows when the rule of law became a reality? In other words, it was at this point it was finally clear that the king was under the law and under the consequences of the law. So what was that a big event that the big book pointed out that shows when the rule of law became a reality? And Jaylene, recipes for 200. Okay, hang on just a second. Oh, you know what? Actually, recipes for 200 had already been asked. Sarah had asked that before, and I guess I failed to mark it. Sorry about that. So I'll give you recipes for 300, Jaylene. Okay. Okay, take care, Logan. Sorry you got to go. See you, buddy. Recipes for 300. What is federalism, and how does it limit the power of federal officials? What is federalism? That's for Jaylene. And then Daniel and Julia, since we've only had one question from history, your next questions must be from history. So give me a category and amount. Obviously, it can't be 200. All right, let's see if we've had some answers here. Sierra, you did pretty well. Sierra said for what was the what's it called? The supreme law of the land. She said Constitution, states, and treaties made under the Constitution. She got 2 out of 3. Constitution and treaties. So we will give her 66 points, 6 points, because that was a question. Does anybody know what that missing one is? It wasn't the states, by the way. States was the wrong answer. Constitution was right. Treaties made on the Constitution, not federal requests. No. Let's see, Sarah, your question was, what event did the book point out that shows when the rule of law became a reality? When it finally became clear that the king was under the law and under the consequences. Yes, laws made in pursuance of the Constitution. That's correct. All right. We're 5 minutes now. Let's see. Julia asks for history for 300. To be our last question. And, oh, wait. Sorry. No, okay. Daniel, did you give me an amount? History for 100. Trying to be different there. You didn't private chat. History for 100. Okay, we got some answers flowing in. Let's see. Sarah. No, that was not the example pointed out in the book. What event showed that the rule of law became a reality? Because we're up against the clock, no more steal attempts. But that event was, I believe it was in chapter 2, the beheading of Charles I. That showed that he was under the law and under the consequences of the law. So I'll just throw out that question, but that was the answer to that one. Jaylene, federalism is a democratic rule divided between national and state governments. Yes, that is federalism, where it's divided between national and state governments. However, the second part of the question is, how does that limit the power of government officials? So you've gotten 150 points so far. Now for the rest of the 150, how does that limit the power of government officials? Let's see. Daniel, history for 100. At the Battle of Lexington, Daniel, what was the command that the militia commander gave to his men? Right before the battle started, at the Battle of Lexington, what was the command that the militia commander gave to his men? And Julia, history for 300. Did Samuel Rutherford, author of Lex Rex, say it was ever possible for an individual to use force against the government? And if so, under what circumstances? Did Samuel Rutherford ever say it was possible for an individual to use force against the government? And if so, under what circumstances? Okay, so those are the last questions. We got about 3 minutes left. And we've got questions from Jaylene, Daniel, Julie. So if you guys want to start planning a time to go into this study room, you guys might want to talk about that now that we're wrapping this up. Don't shoot until you see the whites of their eyes. Daniel, you got the last words spoken before the Battle of Bunker Hill. But no, that was not it. It was don't fire until they fire first. Don't fire until they fire first. So that one gets thrown out. All right, Julia and Jaylene, still waiting for you two. Sounds like YouTube. I didn't say that. Julia, he said yes, so long as it was under circumstance of a ruler who was abusing their God-given power and thus blaspheming God, and thus needs to be overthrown. See, that alone wouldn't have been a reason to use force against the government. You could have picked one of two things, but that was not one of them. Of course, the answer was yes, but if acting in self-defense, okay, that was one thing, or also there was that three-step process where you appeal, where you flee, and then if he still comes after you, then you defend yourself. We saw that in the life of David. Appeal, flight, and defense, taking up arms in defense. So that one gets thrown out. And then do we get an answer from, I think the last one was Jaylene. Okay, Jaylene. Power is divided between two parties so that one can never become more powerful. Each group is granted rights to create different and non-conflicting laws. When you say two parties, the power divided between two parties, what do you mean by that? Are we talking Federalist, Anti-Federalist, Republican, Democrat? Which parties? Jaylene, that was a question to you. State and feds. Okay. So Jaylene says the power is divided between the states and feds so that one can never become all powerful. Each group is granted rights to create different and non-conflicting laws. Okay, you were kind of hitting around the answer without really answering. So I'm going to give you half the points because you got the first half right. So that was 150. Let me add this up real quick and I'll give you the rest of the answer. 9 is 14, 8, 10, 11. So 1140 for CNN. 6, 5, 6, 11, 4, 1. Whew. So 1140 for CNN to 516.6 for Fox. Fox lost this one. Yeah, that's how it happened. Anyway, the answer was, let's see, what was the question? Oh, it was on states and feds. How does that limit power? Well, when the federal government oversteps its bounds, the states have the power to interpose themselves and check and rein in the government. They can say, that law is not a law in this state. So they can actually use the force of government to say this will not be applied. So you might remember that we talked a bit about state interposition. So that's a good example of that power of federalism at work. Okay, so we're at the end of class. Congratulations to the CNN team. They're the winner. Hopefully that gives you a good flavor of what you're going to see. You'll also see that in the study guide. Any other questions that you guys have? I know, it hurts to say it, doesn't it, Julia? I mean, CNN, they're the ones lying about Ben Carson. I mean, oh my word. And then the Politico story. I don't know if any of you have been following this, but Politico ran an article. Well, that's too much. Yeah, you guys should talk about study group if you want to do that. So I'll let you guys discuss that, and you're going to be kicked off